Hello, Spectrum Women. It is I, Becca Lory Hector, here. Finally, sorry, with the October Asking Spectrum Women. I have had quite a month, you guys. I've been in like a transition period in my life for the last month or two. Sorry, my shirt is bothering me today. Okay. For the last whatever, I don't know, month and a half or something. So I've been sort of discombobulated a little bit, and I have been playing catch up a lot this month. And so this is one of the things that I had to play catch up on. So I am so sorry to be kind of this late in the month with dropping Asking Spectrum Women, but I had to take care of myself first, because as we all know, if I don't take care of me, I can't take care of you. And so that is sort of where I've been at. I've also been kind of thinking about my spoons and where I want to spend them and stuff like that. So I don't know if I've talked about it before in Asking Spectrum Women, but I know I've talked about it before on my live stream. So I do struggle with seasonal depression, and this is around the time of year when it starts to sneak in, and lo and behold, it has arrived. It is sneaking in, slowly seeping into my life as the days get shorter. And that I know from my history and all of the lessons of the past will only continue to get worse until about January, mid-January, sometimes February, and then it starts to begin to lift again. And what I promised myself last year was that when this time of year came around, instead of trying to pretend to be normal and that I wasn't struggling and scheduling my life as usual, that this year when I got around to October, November, and December, that I would honor myself and really be kind to myself about the fact that I struggle with this seasonal depression, and schedule my life lighter, right? Lighten my load for these next couple of months. And that is what I intend to do. So ladies and gentlemen who are fans of Spectrum Women, and specifically Asking Spectrum Women with me, I am going to be taking a break. I am going to take a break for November, December, and January from Asking Spectrum Women, to lighten my load a little bit through the depression. I will be back to you guys with a February Asking Spectrum Women, so please make sure that you continue to send your questions to me at info@beccalory.com. Any questions that I get, I save and I use them as we go into the months. I answer as many as I can in a reasonable amount of time on these videos, and then save the rest for the next time. So if you send me them over the next couple of months as the questions come up for you, I will save them and I will start going through them again come February. But I need to do that for myself. And so I hope I'm setting a good example for you guys in terms of self-care and spoon management and kind of self-kindness, right? That's sort of what I'm needing to do at this time of year. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and answer your October questions for Asking Spectrum Women. And then I'm going to take this break because I need it. So here we go. Let's get into these October questions that you guys have been waiting quite some time for. I am sorry. Okay, first question. How do you find working with autism? I have autism and have had countless meltdowns at work. I work in a special school, and I'm fortunate that I have a very understanding head teacher. Well, that's fantastic. You are in a perfect place to sort of address that thing, right? To address your own needs. If you're in a school that kind of understands that about our kids with special needs, right? And so I think that's a wonderful place to be. You're lucky you're not working in an office 9 to 5, which a lot of us had to work through and have meltdowns in. And that's a different feeling, right? So not that it's good to have meltdowns at work, but at least you're in a place where you have a little bit of understanding, right? You have people that understand. But what I can say is that working with autism is a struggle. At least doing that 9 to 5, Monday through Friday thing. For me, it's a lot of wasted time. I spend, if they make me sit at a desk from 9 to 5 for 8 hours, I can do my day's work in about 4. And then I spend the next 4 twiddling my thumbs and getting myself into trouble. So what's always worked for me is sort of needing to work less than most people, but still getting the same amount of work done, which creates a lot of jealousy in the workplace. I also think our struggle with work has to do with the social compliances that we have to do at work, the masking that has to happen in a workplace, even the dress codes that have to happen in a workplace can make us really uncomfortable and use extra spoons. So it's important that you sort of evaluate the situation that you're in. For me, I recognized that kind of the workplace is the way that it is, and it's set up the way that it is. And fortunately, we've got COVID that just kickstarted this whole remote work thing for us that we've all been begging for a long time. But the whole deal with that 9 to 5 is it's not just the workday that gets you exhausted. It's the transportation, the getting dressed, the social masking, the have to remembering your meal planning, any of number of the things that go along with the driving, right? Any of the number of the things that can go along with going to work. So it's not just the work itself and the workplace, right, that exhausts us. There are other components to it. So I needed to recognize that I was not good at sitting at a desk for 8 hours, that I either needed to be in a job where I was moving all the time, or I wasn't monitored in that way for my hours, but instead for my work performed, which ended up being for me an entrepreneurial kind of direction. I had to go in an entrepreneurial direction to get that. The world has changed since I went into entrepreneurialness, which is crazy to say, but the pandemic changed it all. So there's a lot more remote work available and a lot more people willing to hear about accommodations these days, which is really nice. So maybe entrepreneurial isn't a necessary anymore for folks. But what I would tell you is if you're having a lot of meltdowns at work, you got to try to figure out what are the triggers that are happening at work that are causing them, right? So are you having a lot of sensory overload, or are you feeling a lot of social pressure, or are you struggling with any number of other things, executive function, for example, and that's what's making your job difficult. So figuring out what it is in your job that's pushing you to that meltdown place, those triggers, and figuring out if there's something that you can do to accommodate around them, any kind of plan that you can work around them, and making sure that you're using your own accommodations in the process, right? And you can teach those kids, just like I teach you guys through example, how to advocate and how to get their needs met. So don't be ashamed of it also. I think this is a fantastic exercise, but I would absolutely sit and try to figure out, if you don't already know, what is the thing that's pushing you to your meltdown state and what can you do to fix it? Sometimes, and this is a hard one to swallow, sometimes we can't change it. Sometimes it's so, in the workplace that it's part of the job or the way that it functions and runs. Like you can't work in a factory and have silence, right? That you may have to consider a new way to be employed, right? And so if you're really ready to make that change, if it's something that you can't change, there's plenty that you can do in that direction as well, and sort of still work in education, but what can you do to kind of minimize your meltdown capacity, right? So that's sort of what I would recommend in that case. Working with autism is difficult today, in the now, getting easier, but up until the pandemic, really hard for us on the spectrum because there were these stringent schedules and requirements of hours of things that in time you had to be in a place, which is an odd way to kind of quantify somebody's work abilities, but that's how it was, and that's really difficult for us. So you're not alone. You're not alone in feeling like the workplace is tough to be in. Okay, next up. Next question is, do you struggle with self-harm at all? I will say that probably a few years ago I would say no, but now I've sort of re-understood what other things as self-harm than just the usual self-harm. So most of the time when folks talk about self-harm, they're talking about perhaps something like hitting yourself in the head, right? We have a lot of people that cut themselves, and that is self-harm. But there are other forms of self-harm that aren't quite so visible. Things like eating disorders are self-harm. Things like, what else could I say is self-harm besides eating disorders and things like that? There are other components. I'm sure they'll come to me. They're just escaping me right now. But there are other ways that we can self-harm. For example, choosing situations that aren't healthy for us, or staying like in a workplace that doesn't work for us, or staying in a family environment that doesn't work for us. Those things are also self-harm in their own way. So when I think about self-harm in that way, I have definitely had my struggles with food. It has definitely had its place in my life. I've definitely struggled with suicidal tendencies. I still do. That's something that I will probably always struggle with, and I consider that sort of a form of self-harm. And I think that where all that comes from is seeking a sense of control over something. And I think being on the spectrum makes us feel out of control a lot. Of everything. And so any little thing that we can have a little bit of control over, and that usually comes down to the care and well-being of our physical person, right, feels good. It feels like a relief from the not feeling in control all the time. And I have a suspicion that that's where that tendency lies for us. So I have had some experience with self-harm. I do struggle with non-traditional types of self-harm, like having suicidal ideations. And, it's going to be a struggle for the rest of my life. It's sort of now the way my brain is programmed. And the only thing that I can do differently now is how I respond to it and how I'm going to deal with it. So when you're having those urges and feelings to self-harm, again, it's like that mystery solve for the workplace. What is it that's triggering you to feel that way? And what can you do to change that thing? Because that's where you're going to get the change. It's not enforcing and force stopping those behaviors, which would be great if it was so easy to go cold turkey in those kind of things. But it's trying to figure out what's pushing you to feel that way, and can you change that thing? Right? And that's what I would be looking for in terms of self-harm as well. Of course, I want you to be safe. If you are self-harming, seek help. Make sure you can go anywhere from someplace in your school to a counselor, to a social worker, to a therapist, to a hospital even. But please take care of yourself. Know that self-harm is an avoidance tactic in its own way. It is a way to band-aid a problem, but it's not fixing the problem itself. And so please seek the help that you need if you are struggling with self-harm in any form. Okay, moving along. Next question. Okay, I love these questions. Some of them are so interesting to me because I remember how in my early diagnosis time, like in those first year or two, autism was everywhere. It was in everything. It explained everything. I saw it everywhere. I mean, I couldn't. But what we need to remember as autistics when we get diagnosed is that we are still human beings. And so not everything is autism. Some of it is just your humanness. Some of it is the way that your humanness manifests itself, with your autistic brain. So we need to remember to not kind of lump everything at autism when we get our diagnosis. And in that realm, I will answer this question. How common is I can't ever say this, Phantom smells, that's what it is. I can never say it. Phantom smells. I've started smelling phantom ashtray smell for the last week. Okay, so here's where I'm at with that. I don't know a lot of information about neurological stuff like that. And I know that it's kind of probably in the realm of understanding of like synesthesia, right? And how we process that. But I want to tell you that I do believe we have a larger amount of that in the autism world, but I don't think that it's necessarily an autism link. I think that because our brains are wired differently and we have different sensitivities, that we can be more sensitive to things like this, and our brains will rewire to do these kinds of things because we have a brain that's wired differently. And so it's not surprising that more of us would have these kind of things happen to us, these kind of neurological incidents happen to us. However, I am also someone who is a migraine sufferer, as the person is who is asking the question. And sometimes that phantom smell can be a part of your migraine structure, and it's not a part of your autism. It's a part of your migraine structure. And you can get phantom smells that way. And so what I want to say to you is, how common is it? Well, it's pretty common in human beings. How common is it with autistics? I would say probably a little more common, since our smell sensitivity tends to be kind of up there. And so we tend to be more sensitive to smells, as well as just smelling more things more accurately. So I think it might be more common for us just to experience it from that point of view. Oftentimes, though, people will accuse me of smelling something that doesn't exist, and it does exist. They just can't smell it. So remember that too, right? Sometimes something like an ashtray smell, it sticks to clothes, and it sticks to chairs, and it sticks to things, right? Sometimes if you open a drawer that maybe has a shirt with, the smell on it, it'll waft on over to me, and I'll smell it. Nobody else in the room will smell it, and I'll think phantom ashtray smell, right? But it's not. It's just a smell that other people aren't sensitive enough to. So there's a couple of different ways to look at it. Of course, the other way to look at it is the more spiritual way, which is something that I hear all the time, something like an ashtray smell or a very particular perfume or flower. A lot of times people say that that's when your family members are visiting you, right? That they're spiritually visiting you, and that smell brings that back to you. So there's lots of different explanations for it. I want to say it's not like an oddity, oh my God, run to the neurologist, you have a brain tumor thing. But it's definitely something that is probably particular to you and your brain structure, and not necessarily an autism thing. Okay, so that's my answer to that question. The next one, when I had an MRI, they said my white lesions were nothing to worry about and was common with migraine. Could it be an autism correlation? Well, could it be? Maybe. It's also, though, because I am a migraine sufferer, the white lesions are really common for migraine sufferers too. Do a lot of autistics get migraines? Do a lot of us have the white lesions? Maybe. Sure as crap, nobody's looking into it though. So I don't have the answer to you. Could it be? Probably, maybe, I don't know. But we do know it's a correlation to migraine symptoms. And I do know that a lot of us on the spectrum have migraines, though I think that many of our migraines are actually sensory overload headaches and not true migraines. But there's no kind of category for that when you go to the neurologist, so it kind of gets lumped into Migraineville. So that's interesting too. So I would kind of play around with that, but it sounds like a lot of this is a migraine symptom, and I do tend to get migraines more when I'm having sensory overload. So consider that in the play here of those two questions. Okay. Let's see. This is our last question. Oh my goodness. Okay. Last question. How do we work with self-advocacy, ultimately meaning disclosure, not to mention with clarity, confidence, and pride, when most people's experience of disclosure is abysmal and plunges us into anxiety, uncertainty, and shame? Perhaps I should add that this is my experience and my concern for others. In solidarity. Well, it is a concern, right? So it's a concern for me. I will tell you that though I am as open as one can be about their autism, I mean, I am open about it all over social media, all over in my life, there are a couple of places where I don't step up to the plate in terms of disclosure. And that's not because I'm not comfortable with my autism. It's because I don't think that the world is ready yet for all of us and all of our autismness quite yet. And that makes it still unsafe for us to disclose in all places. And that is my opinion. And so going forward, as I answer this question, please understand it is not the right answer. It is my answer. It's my opinion about handling this. And so when I talk about disclosure in the workplace, I always say to people, well, what are the accommodations you would be asking for? Like, where is the disclosure coming from? Have you not started this job yet and you just want to disclose as kind of ahead of time? Or are you struggling with a particular thing and you need to disclose so that you can ask for help? Is it, where is it coming from? Right? And once we've sort of figured that out, that's where it's important. So if you're needing an accommodation, I always say go through with disclosure because you need that accommodation. And if you don't get it, you're not going to be able to sustain employment. And if you ask and they say no, then you shouldn't be in that employment anyway, right? And so that's how I kind of look at it. In terms of needing accommodations. If you're not going to be asking for accommodations as a result of your disclosure, then I would maybe reconsider disclosing. Right now, the workplace isn't so friendly to being autistic and being neurodiverse. Tendency is to have really terrible experiences when we disclose in the workplace. I've had them. I know other people have had them. It sounds like the person asking the question has had them. And so what happens for a lot of us is either everything that we're doing, whether we're good or bad at it, then gets blamed on the autism, right? We're overreacting because of the autism. We don't see it that way because of our autism. We just blah, 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 blah because of the autism. So that tends to then be the way that people think of us and look at us and our work performance, right? And it kind of invades there. The other thing is that oftentimes people will do the opposite and they will want to be overly sensitive to the fact that you have autism and they want to ask all these questions and they want to, do you need anything, treat you special all the time, right? And not just let you do your job. And so because those are two possible outcomes and I've had both of them, and I know people who've had both of them, I still kind of, unless you're asking for an accommodation, I don't necessarily think disclosure is something that I would do in the workplace right now because of the way it is. It is changing and hopefully it will get safer for us to disclose and it'll get healthier for us to disclose. But for right now, that's sort of my answer on that front. The other place that I do not disclose ever anymore is in a medical scenario, not in a doctor's office, not in the ER, nowhere. Because I have had horrible things happen to me by disclosing. I have had people mistreat me. I've had them talk about me like I'm a child, talk about me around me, but not to me, take away decision making from me just because I've disclosed that I'm autistic, right? Or I disclose that I'm autistic, and because they have this stigma version of autism in their head, they don't believe me, or they think I'm exaggerating and making it up, and then I get treated like a liar. While I'm in that scenario. Neither case gets me the best medical treatment possible. Neither case gets me the care that I need in the way that I need it. And because of that, it makes me feel unsafe, and it makes me feel like it's dangerous to disclose to people that do that to me, especially when I'm in a scenario where it may very well be life or death. And so in that scenario, I also am not comfortable disclosing my autism. So when I say to you, when people ask about disclosure, I always say, it's a case by case basis and a scenario by scenario basis. You really want to be clear what you're looking for out of that disclosure, right? Disclosure to a family member and having your family love and understand you as in all of your autismness is one thing. Asking an entire corporate organization to accept you that way out in the world today is not going to go over quite as well. And so we need to make smart choices for ourselves. We need to look at our lives, what our needs and priorities are, and make a decision based on that. And that's sort of how I look at disclosure. You guys, I really hope you found these answers helpful. I know the questions are always helpful. I hear them and I go, you know what? I've had other people ask me this. And so I'm hoping that the answers help all of you too. If you like the answers, then send me your questions. You can always send them to me directly at info@beccalory.com, or you can comment wherever you're seeing this video with your questions. I am more than happy to screenshot them and save them around till I do the next Asking Spectrum Women. Again, you guys, this is going to be my last Asking Spectrum Women for 2020. I'm going to take a break for November, December, and January, and I will be back in February with Asking Spectrum Women 2021. Can you believe it already, guys? We somehow are making it through this year. Amazing. Anyway, please, if you like this video, share it. Give me some likes, some thumbs up. Let me know in the comments. I want to make sure that I'm still putting my spoons into stuff that you guys find useful. As always, I am available to you as a resource. You can email me directly at info@beccalory.com. But for now, I say goodbye, farewell. I'm going to go do some self-care for a couple of months, and I will see you guys next year. Bye.